Welcome one and all to the SOE Community Webcast, and today it's all about usability. And joining us is Abby Watt, who is with our usability department. So, what is your actual title?
My actual job title is Usability Moderator.
Usability Moderator.
Although
okay.
I'm also our QA trainer as well.
Okay. So now, usability is sort of an odd thing. It's very different from standard QA. So usability is all about how people interact with the games and the controls and that sort of thing. So here, let me demonstrate what I know about usability. All right, I'm presented with a beer mug. This is the user interface, right?
Right.
Right. Okay, so that functions, and then the weight as well, yes, and how long it takes me to get it from the ground into my face. So is that basically what you do with the games as well? Do you see how people pick things up? Are they right-handed? Are they left-handed? Are they picking up with both hands?
Exactly. What we do in usability is we have people come in and play our games, and traditional bug testing is, does the game work? Well, that's what our QA department does. They make sure stuff works. What we do in usability is we make sure people like how it works and that they can figure out how it works. So for instance, if this were supposed to be a fork, I would be super confused. So we want to make sure that if someone makes a fork in our game, people know it's a fork and they know how to use it as a fork.
Okay. And then, well, tell us, let's get a bit of information about you first. How long have you been with SOE?
I have been with SOE for just under 2 years.
And did you start out in the usability lab?
I started out as a QA tester, actually, for free roams.
Really? What moved you into usability?
So that was kind of a happy accident for me. I was talking with someone who said, yeah, I'm going over to the usability lab today. And I said, oh, what are you doing? And she said, well, I'm moderating. And I said, wow, that sounds really cool. You know, if you hear anything else about that, let me know. And she got this look on her face and she said, yeah, I will. And a little while later, my team lead said, hey, Abby, are you available to do a usability test today? And so I started working with the usability team as a QA tester. And then after a little while, I was fortunate enough to get a full-time position on the usability team.
So in a company of this size, we have a lot of games, but are you typically working on new games in development, or do you also work with expansions or existing content?
Anything that's got new content coming in, we will bring it in. So we do have our new games that we're testing, but also if there's an expansion going on, we'll be testing that too.
And how many people work for the usability department?
Right now, there's myself and my boss, Ryan Antonelli.
And so do you ramp up in numbers then if we've got a new product under development that needs testing?
Generally not. What we'll do is there's me, and I'm the person in the room with people while they're testing, but then we recruit either externally or we borrow testers from within our company to come in and actually play the games.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, where do you find people? You said that you use some people internally. You just ask for volunteers?
Yep.
Come and tell us what you really think about how this game handles, that sort of thing?
Well, it's basically come and play games, and it's hard to say no to that.
And let's say that one of the things we're always looking for in these games is how accessible is this to a new player, someone who's never played our products, or maybe they're new to MMOs in general. Do you also recruit that sort of player for usability?
We do, and for that we
will. And where do you find them? In the mall?
Yes. No, we use an external recruiting company for that. So if, for instance, we're testing Clone Wars Adventures and we need kids 8 to 12 years old who have no MMO experience whatsoever, we can talk to our research people and say, hey, we need these kids, and they'll find them for us.
Wow, really? Okay, so how many people do you usually bring in at once?
Generally speaking, it's going to depend on if you're looking to look at cooperative gameplay or multiplayer, or if you're just looking at solo gameplay. If you're looking at solo gameplay, you want to have fewer people in one session so you can really concentrate on what that person is doing. If you're looking at cooperative gameplay, then your limit is how many people can you fit in your multiplayer game.
Right. Now, I've seen the usability lab. It kind of looks like one of those interrogation rooms at a police station, right? You've got these cameras, you've got microphones. Basically, you're spying on these people as they play the game.
Oh, we're totally spying on them, but they don't really realize that we're spying on them. Once you put them in front of the game station and have them start playing, they will ignore the camera that's this far in front of their face. And they generally don't even see the microphone that's hanging from the middle of the ceiling.
Right. So what do you actually observe? Let's use the example of bringing in these kids who have never played these games before, and they're now testing Clone Wars Adventures. What are you actually watching for?
It depends on what new content we're looking at this time around. If we're just testing, hey, how do new players react to the game in general, we'll be looking at how do they move. That's a big one. Do they use the mouse? Do they use the keyboard? Do they use the arrow keys on the keyboard? We'll be looking at, are they familiar with camera controls? Or even if we ask them to get to a certain NPC in the game, can they figure out how to get there? Is that intuitive for them?
Okay.
Or if we've got a specific system going in, like a mini game, we'll have them play the mini game. We'll see if they can pick up the rules based on the tutorial that's in there, or if there's no tutorial, if they can sort of figure it out without instructions.
And how do you collect the feedback? I mean, are you recording what they say? Are you taking notes? Do you record video, that sort of thing?
We do take notes, we do record videos. The most valuable part of our sessions, though, is actually having the developers come in and watch the people play. That's really powerful, and we've had developers who've gone to our tests, seen kids play, and then they go back immediately and make some changes based on that.
Okay, so you've got somebody playing this game, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not getting anywhere. I mean, do you ever see the devs rush up to them? Here's how you do it like this. See, look, you have to move your hand like this and click on the thingy.
It's really tempting to do that a lot of the time, even for me. But fortunately, we have a buffer in that our lab is over here, and about 100 feet away is our observation room.
Oh, safe distance, no interference.
Right.
So it's almost like a scientific experiment in some ways.
Oh, definitely.
Here's the product. Let's see what they do with it. See if they manage to make it through the maze, that sort of thing. And do we pay people for this?
Yes, we do.
We do. What do you typically get if you're recruited as a usability tester for I don't know, a half-day session? Or how long are these sessions usually?
The sessions are usually about an hour to 90 minutes.
Oh, pretty short.
And I just did some research in usability that said participants, depending on their level, get an average of like $70 or $80 for coming in for usability.
$70 or $80
to come in and play a game
for 90 minutes. I'm in the wrong job. I'm going to have to definitely go and do that usability freelance testing.
Yeah, me too.
Thing. Yeah, wow, that's terrific. When was the last test that you ran?
About half an hour ago.
Really? What were you testing?
Can't tell you.
Oh, come on.
It's a PlayStation Network title that's going to be coming up soon.
Something new, something we can't talk about, hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah.
All right, what is the last play test that you can talk about?
Oh, we had kids come in for Clone Wars Adventures.
Before the launch of the game entirely? Or?
This was after the launch of the game. We were trying to see if kids like the game one way versus another way.
Can you give us an example of the two options that you offered them? Or, is this more NDA stuff? I mean, we can't talk about anything. I mean, how am I going to get paid for the juicy tidbits that the audience is looking for? No, okay, fine. Okay, apparently she wants to keep her job here. So what happens then what if it's something that, maybe it's a UI element that the dev team has spent a lot of time putting in, and then they find out that the target audience isn't really getting it, or they don't enjoy it? I mean, how do you convey that to the development team, and how do you deal with the frustration that they'll give you back in return? Because it's going to be hard if you've just spent 2 months developing something that just isn't going over well with the usability testers.
Well, ideally, that's why you have the game come in early and often into the lab. So before you get set in stone, before you spent the 2 months, you bring in people, have them look at even a rough layout of your UI and say, okay, people, what do you think?
Really? And would you do that with more experienced players who could sort of see how that would be implemented later, or?
Not necessarily.
Really?
Something that we have done, for instance, for Clone Wars, is we wanted to know what would be more intuitive for them to report a bug. So we printed out some pictures for them, and we said, hey, if you found a problem in the game, which button would you want to push? And they circled which button they wanted to push.
Very, very interesting. I bet that some of the dev teams laid bets too, right?
$40
on the button on the left.
I had a prediction myself, and I ended up being pretty much wrong.
Is that right? So you would say then that some of the things that the usability testers come up with are surprising to us?
Oh, definitely.
Even though you've spent so much time in the industry, it's still hard to predict how people will use things?
Well, and that's why you need to have a usability lab, because I've been in the industry. I'm not our target audience anymore just because I have not insider knowledge necessarily, but a whole lot of experience with games. That's why we want to have people come in and play the game, because they're not me, they're not in the industry. We need to see how they're actually playing the game.
Ah. So how many tests do you run every week, say?
It can depend. It's really based on who's doing what. I believe last year we ended up, well, my statistic that I have is since March of 2008, we've run a good 200 plus tests.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So how much reporting is involved in that as well? I mean, do you have to document everything in text too and send that around, or?
There is some documentation. Again, the big value of these tests is having the developers look at it.
And watch it in progress. And
Yeah.
they have time to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
If they don't, though, we do have a report where the usability team does come up with our top issues list, and we will also include the videos of what went on and just say, hey, by the way, here this is, check it out if you want.
That's really cool. So what is the difference? I assume there's got to be a lot of advanced work done as well. Now, as a moderator, does that mean that you're the one that goes into the room with the testers and says, now we'd like you to do X?
Mm-hmm.
And how much prep work is involved in that? Because you have to develop an entire series, like a script almost, of the processes that you're going to go through.
Yeah, it depends. For instance, for a new player experience test, that's pretty easy, because you can just be like, hey, go in, play the game.
And just turn them loose.
Yep.
Right.
If we're testing something specific, though, we do have a script. And that, unfortunately, is a part of my job where I have to play the game to figure out what the script is going to be based on the developers.
That must be really rough for you,
I know,
this playing games thing.
It's so rough that I have to play every game that we test. It can take a good few hours to just go, hey, you know, what do we need the kids to do? Is this not buggy right now, too? Because a lot of our stuff is pre-production. And just make sure that I have coherent instructions for the kids to follow.
Now, especially when you're dealing with kids or, you know, some of the adults of my acquaintance, is it frustrating for them sometimes? They think they're going in to play test a game and basically they are running into a wall of problems. Do you find that it's sometimes frustrating for them to go through the testing process?
It can be. It definitely can be. A lot of the times people will have a great time while they're testing because they're playing a game. But sometimes, and this is really when we need them to be there, they will find something that just doesn't make sense to them. And they'll get super frustrated sometimes.
And that's when you remind them, dude, you're getting $75 for this, right?
Well, or I'll step in and gently sort of guide them to where they should be going to.
Okay.
Because we do want to see them get a little bit frustrated, but not so much that they like throw the keyboard across the room.
So, usability or human factors, I mean, that's an actual field of study these days as well. How important do you think it is to have formal training as opposed to the way that you did it? You came into it sort of sideways. As a QA tester, you were already used to looking for problem areas. But do you think that formal study would be useful if somebody wanted to get into the industry on that basis?
Definitely, and there is a whole usability industry, not just for games usability, but for everything, like hospital software, for instance, really needs to be usable, otherwise it doesn't work. Depending on precisely what you want to do, that is going to be really helpful. For us, most of what we're doing is we're having our developers watch the kids. I definitely can find issues there, and fortunately, when I started on the team, we had someone with a master's degree in usability who sort of mentored me for a while. If we wanted to get into more complex things like biometrics or eye tracking or things like that, we probably really would want to bring in someone who knows what they're doing.
Have we ever done that? That sounds fairly sci-fi to me.
We haven't gotten quite that sci-fi yet.
That sounds pretty cool, though. I mean, biometrics, that's where you would be measuring pulse and heart rate and breathing and that sort of thing?
Yeah, biometrics would be you put some nodes on people's skin, and I'm not quite sure where because I don't have that degree. But you're measuring basically how intense is their emotion that they're feeling is one biometric, and then is it positive or negative is the other one you're testing.
Oh, I can hardly wait till we get into that because that's actually kind of cool. But are you able to accurately evaluate the emotions that people are feeling? Are they fairly open in their expression after a period of time? How do you get them to relax enough to react honestly to the testing process?
That's actually a really good question. Sometimes they don't. A lot of the time, you're watching someone, for instance, we've asked kids, hey, could you figure out how to submit a help ticket? And they'll take 15 minutes to submit the ticket, and we ask them, so was that easy? And they'll say yes. It's like,
but it took you
okay.
15 minutes.
Right. So the real trick is, regardless of how relaxed people are, still looking at what they're doing and saying, okay, regardless of how much fun they're having, which is of course important to usability for games, what are they getting into? Really, there's one important question that we ask them. All of our questions are important, obviously, but the big one to determine how much fun they had is, would you recommend this game to a friend?
Ah.
And if unless they hate their friends, they're going to say, would my friend like this? Was it fun for me? Oh yeah, it was fun. Okay, I would recommend this to a friend.
Okay. Now, when you bring them in, describe the process. You've just recruited these people. They're coming in at 10 a.m. And what happens exactly?
So it's 10 a.m. What they'll do.
Do they need special security passes to get on the grounds?
They will go over to our security office, where they'll sign our non-disclosure agreement saying, hey, you can't talk about this either. And then they'll come over to our lab while I give them a debriefing, or a briefing actually, I guess at that point, where I just say, hey, you're here to help us find flaws in our game and to play the game, obviously, and have fun. Then after they know what they're doing, they'll head into the Usability Lab, where I'll sit them down, and whatever we're going to have them do, I'll say, okay, you are going to go ahead and just play the game. Or I want you to go to games and click on this game specifically. Then after usually about an hour to 90 minutes, I'll say, okay, time's up. It's time to answer a questionnaire. Then they have a questionnaire where they can give us feedback. A lot of it's open-ended too, so they can really tell us what they think.
Okay.
Then there's a brief interview where I just give them an opportunity to say anything else they want to, and then they're done.
Really? And you do find that people are open and honest about this then?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Now, how does this sort of usability testing differ from the traditional beta tests that we also do? Because you're basically looking at a relatively small group of individuals, but they come in several times.
Mm-hmm.
But how does their experience differ than a beta test? I mean, obviously you're able to observe them. Is that the major difference?
That is one major difference. Another one is that a beta tester, really they're doing a labor of love for us. And they have some connection with our company, whether it's they just met us as a company or they've played our games for years and they're trying to help us out. They already have an opinion about what they're doing, and they want to do it. Otherwise, why beta test if it's not something you want to do? Whereas these people, it is more of a job for them. They don't necessarily love us as a company. They probably don't even know us as a company.
So they're mostly coming in for the money, and that helps them be more honest about and objective about the experience that they're having?
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you bring the same people back, or do you have to have fresh people all the time?
It depends. There is a certain, I think, 6-month period between times where we can have people come in. If we're doing it internally, it depends on whether or not we want people who are experienced with the game or people who have had no experience before.
That's very interesting. And so when's your next test?
When is our next test? That's coming up on the 19th, actually.
Oh, that's very good. And you're not allowed to talk about that one either, I suppose.
Probably not.
All right, so mud, swimming pool, or soup bowl?
It depends how big you are.
Excellent. Anything else you want to tell us about what's happening in the Usability Lab at the moment?
Oh, geez. I don't think there's anything too big and exciting. We're just keeping on, and it's exciting to see the different games that we have come through.
And if somebody that lives in the San Diego area wants to get involved in this really highly paid usability testing that we bring people in for, what's their best bet? Are these things advertised in the newspaper or what?
Our researching company is Taylor Research. You can go to taylorresearch.com, and there they advertise not just for us, but for other people too. If, however, you don't mind not going through the research company, which in this case means maybe getting different compensation, you can email us, if I can give out an email address.
Well, it depends on whether you want to get emails.
Oh, I do.
There you go. Now, when you email her, do not complain about class balance and EQ, because she's probably not involved in that. So go ahead.
All right, so our email address is soeds@soe.sony.com, and that's SOE Development Services.
there you go. So now you know how to get involved, and if you have any follow-up questions, let us know, and we'll try to post them to Facebook for you. Thanks very much, Abby. That was really fun.
Thanks for
Can I
having
come
me.
test?
Yes.
Oh, good, good,
Absolutely.
good. Goodbye, all. Thank you for
Bye.
tuning in. Be well.